It's basically, actually I'll talk about it now. The director, which is myself, at my discretion can waive the sketch plan requirement if it deems that it's not really necessary to go through that process, since this is not adding any roads or having any significant impact beyond what's already existing within that smaller lot. It's a pretty simple request that they have, so we just streamlined it for the final plat request, which is going tonight for your recommendation, which you get passed on to City Council. Public notice, all the requirements there for the 15 days. And so this is what was in the paper, this is what's on the site, and this is the mailing that was sent out to all the property owners within the proper distance around the property itself. We have submission requirements, of course. This is what we send out to the applicant. We need all these different things. All those different things have been submitted to us. There's also the requirement for anything additional that the director would have. There was nothing specific to this one. The location itself, in case you're not familiar with this, so Hospital Road, Mill Street, the Brush Secondary Campus is right down here. Over here is Ace. So that's the property itself. As it sits right now, it's a 3.29 acre property that's zoned commercial. The subdivision that split lot 1 and 2 of what's existing, that was done back in 1999. And also directly to the north is the North Point Apartments, or the Meadow Vista Apartments, that council's real familiar with, and possibly the Planning Commission as well. So of course we look through the compatibility aspects of any application as it pertains to what's required in the code. And so on the screen here's a list of all the different components of our comprehensive plan where this subdivision, I believe, does align with that. The first two talk about supporting redevelopment efforts within existing city limits. The third one down, the goal 4.1, talks about compatibility with adjacent land uses. So there's kind of a commercial strip on the south side of Mill Street that this is part of as well. Access, roadway network, and so we're working the plat so that that's a component as well. Then it talks about overall economic development for the goal 11, policy 11, and strategy 11 there. And so this dividing one commercial lot into two further expands the economic development opportunities. The end use, which is not what the decision is tonight, or even what the hearing is about tonight, but the end use is for commercial retail, which is a use by right within a commercial zoning district. And then diving down into the details, and so this is the final plat that was submitted, so I'll be referring to different components of this. And specifically in Article 10 of Chapter 16, it provides the design standards for a variety of categories for land use. All the categories that are listed in there aren't relevant for this proposed subdivision, so I'll go over those that are relevant and then provide comments for each one of those. So number one, it does require minimum lot sizes. So for commercial zone property, it has to be a minimum of 15,000 square feet. These two lots are 49,600 square feet and 93,819 square feet, clearly meeting that minimum requirement. The lot 2 is unusual in its size. You notice there, it's not just a typical rectangle or square. But given the constraints of access from the west side, which this is the primary access to the Brush Secondary Campus, and then there's no access over here. This is the only means to provide access to this property, and so thus it's essentially configured that way, but I'll come back to that here shortly. Easement requirements, a 6-foot easement requirement is what our code states, but a 10-foot utility easement encompasses both of the properties all the way around there for all the necessary utility access, as well as a egress easement right here. And so how this is essentially is going to serve is this home right here. It's a multifamily home. They have access here off of the private road that they utilize. If you've driven through there, it's kind of a circular driveway. But there's also a dedicated access right over here on Mill Street. And so what we're looking at doing here is streamlining this. And so there's one access point for this property, and into this property as well. That way we don't have existing access, future access for down here, and then the third access right here, all within close proximity to each other. It made sense to have one access point, so that's what that easement is for there. The street component, although no streets are created with this subdivision, the access point kind of speaks to that overall. This is an overlay, it's not exact, but a rough overlay of what that looks like with the existing property. So here's that current access that goes up to the house there. And so this is very, very wide. I think it's 76 feet or so. So wider than realistically we'll need, but at the same time, this width is not really usable space. And so it's best, again, just to utilize that as a primary access for the 3 different places. Another thing that it speaks about is sidewalks and trails. So currently there's a sidewalk that does run along the Brush Secondary Campus here, and then along Mill Street as well. So if this project does move forward as a retail establishment, it's expected that a lot of students would likely come here during lunch and different times to get, snacks or whatever. And so do we need to have an additional access or an additional sidewalk or trail as part of this subdivision? I would say no, that's not necessary, because there's, again, access here, across there. However, looking at future planning, just speaking with the school district as we have about future traffic concerns and future planning on their site, right now they have this kind of somewhat unofficial access here. So in the future, it might make sense that if this was a more formal access, that we line it with Weisbart here. And if we did that, there's more kind of unusable space along this side. And so maybe we can work with the school district at that point and dedicating some kind of trail, sidewalk-ish easement along there to give access to, if anything, future is here, and of course, if this goes forward as well. And then storm drainage, there's also an easement here for a dedicated portion of this newly created lot for that specific purpose. Any future development on lot 2 down here, they would be required to address stormwater at that time, depending on their use. But that is set apart specifically for that purpose as well. And so if that project goes forward, we have some kind of agreement in place with the landowner for the city to get access to that as necessary. And then all the other pieces, water, property users will tie into the existing line along Mill Street. Fire protection, the Brush Fire Department did look at this, they provided no comments. Sewer, same thing, they would tie into the Mill Street sewer line. And then utilities, XL has been notified of the planned use. They provided no comments. There is a power pole that comes through here, almost right down the middle. And so that's something that we would have to address with the future user of the site overall. And kind of as a side note, it doesn't specifically call this out in our land use code, but when it comes to traffic, traffic along Mill Street has been a point of concern for the city over the last 1 to 2 years. However, to clarify this application, I mentioned this before, but to clarify it again, the subdivision itself does nothing in relation to traffic, whereas the future use of the property is the real determinant of the traffic. The intended use of retail for the property goes through a separate site plan review process where the traffic is directly addressed there. At the same time, we still recognize there is clearly a correlation between the subdivision and the use, as the subdivision lays the framework for future development, and the city is continually assessing the implications of new development for this site as well as any other sites in the area. As part of the traffic study, or as part of the site plan review, is that they are required to do a traffic study, which has been submitted to the city. Citizen comments during our notice period, no direct comments have been received by me. I did receive 2 inquiries from nearby property owners that did receive the notification in the mail. So overall, conclusions and recommendations on this. Staff recommends that I think I worded that kind of weird up there. Basically, staff does recommend that if the Planning Commission accepts the conclusions from the discussion as we talk about it tonight, recommend that you recommend the approval to City Council with a couple of conditions, those being that our engineer, Western Engineering Consultants, approve the civil plans that are associated with the shared access that are being wrapped up right now. And then there's a couple of additions that need to be made to the plat itself. They need to add the word dedication above where the dedication is. Add in the notes, quote, approval of this plan may create a vested property right pursuant to Article 68 of Title 24 CRS as amended. Our land use code requires that. And then add a drainage easement to the legend. And then another part, and this will be up to you, to your consideration or not, is simply the environmental aspect of it. And so I reached out because I was told that this site originally had a landfill on it years and years ago. And so the purchaser did do a phase 1 environmental as well as some geotechnical work there. And the report essentially came back that an old city map that our city clerk provided did show on that map, I think it was 1954 or something like that, city landfill or city dump, something like that. And there was no other documentation that they could find as well. The current property owner had let them know that when he purchased the property that he did a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental. He didn't have access to those reports any longer, however. And so the fact that it existed in the past on some level, the geotech didn't discover anything of concern, but the fact that it was there in the past based on the conclusions that they have, that automatically leaves some element of concerns on there. And so we could require an additional condition of the purchaser that they do clear that up all the way. So that's my report on that one.
Tyler, so you're saying that that sidewalk, the green, the future, they're not putting that in today. You're saying that could be worked out between the school district and the property owner in the future?
I guess the possibilities are endless for that. So my recommendation is to, if all this does go forward, is work with the school district to see if they'd be interested in providing an easement there. And then potentially we can find out who'd be interested in putting their funds together to actually cover the cost of whether it's a sidewalk or a trail or something.
It seems like that would be beneficial even with the housing going across the street.
Access there,
Mhm.
street,
Mhm.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it
Because
would-
that's where the kids are gonna walk.
yeah, a line across, you could have a dedicated crosswalk right there.
Yeah.
The shortest distance the kids will walk.
Yeah, they're crossing there anyway. Now they don't have to go through stickers to get there.
Right.
Tyler, on that ingress, egress, easement, who would maintain that? I mean, that's like, what, 75 feet wide?
Correct. Yeah, so that would technically be the responsibility of, and we'll have to get all this in writing, of course, but for the site plan, this will be their only access, and of course, nothing's going on as of now here. And so the responsibility, and we would put that in the conditions for that site plan approval, that maintenance be done by them. And then also add the condition, if future users come on or something like that, that some kind of formal agreement will have to be made as far as responsibility of maintenance, unless they want to keep it themselves the whole time.
So it's an easement, not a right-of-way, correct?
Correct.
And then that will be built to a certain standard as far as that street then?
Correct. Yeah, that was one of the recommendations I had, that the civil plans associated with that, because it's a private access, but it's used by multiple folks, is that gets approved by our
And
engineer.
where does that stormwater go to?
As far as the release of it?
Yeah,
That, I believe, there's a spot over here where there's an element that's gonna go out onto Mill Street and then run toward the drain that's further down by Ace.
did Dell have any comments on that?
Yeah, he and Chad both talked about that, and they both had no concerns with that.
It's not gonna, yeah, just worry about too much water, then you flood someone else. The other thing I was thinking of too was where that wide easement is supposed to take care of that leftover piece of property to the south, right? So that they have.
Yes.
Right. So I was just thinking, this is just food for thought. I'm not sure what's gonna go in there in the future, but one of the things that usually, depending on what does go there, the fire department looks at that to see if they have a way to get through, like all the way through and loop around versus having to put in an internal loop. So I didn't know if it was possible to somehow have that easement connect to that, I'm not sure if it's Beat Digger Drive or with the school one, that easement there. I'm assuming that's an easement because there's a couple houses on it.
Good question. I actually would be surprised if there is an easement. There could be, but the reason I say that is because both of these houses actually have an access point here directly off of Mill. Although there's an access to this road as well, there's a dedicated access off Mill Street.
Oh, so that's their access point.
Correct.
Okay.
What does that access look like to the house? I mean, is it just something that they've been using, or is it something that is actually?
You mean this one up here?
Yeah.
It's, I covered it up with this, but it's, I don't know if they use it or not. This one is probably more convenient, I would imagine. I see cars parked down here, which means if they came through here, they went all the way, which they could do. It's probably not used very often, I wouldn't think, but it has been used just based on the wear and tear that's done there.
I guess I'm just curious why we're making the purchaser of the one lot maintain something that is really only necessary for the other two people. The lot that might be purchased and then the home. Because they could make an access directly off of Mill Street onto there.
They could, but from the city standpoint, it makes sense to have one access. If you have multiple accesses, one after another, getting on the road and off the road can add a little more confusion.
And I get that point, it's just having the purchaser maintain that property when, you know what I'm saying? Like in reality, they don't really need it. I mean,
Well, if we,
they're maintaining something that future benefits the other two property owners.
correct, this isn't, I guess, unheard of in like a shopping center or something like that, where you have a lot of different users with one or two different access points. Usually something bigger like that, sometimes it's a property owner who maintains that themselves. They're going to be the highest user of that for now too. You know, they're going to have a handful of cars in and out throughout the day, whereas they'll have dozens and dozens of cars.
Does the home there have an actual legal easement right there? Or is that something that's also being discussed in this?
There is no easement right now there, so I think it's just kind of historically being grandfathered in, because it's cut into the road there, so it was given to them at some point. So this house dates back, actually I forgot how long ago it was. It's been quite a while, 60s or something like that.
It's a radio station.
Radio station.
Yeah, I remember it being a radio station a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Okay.
Seems like it meets all the conditions.
Any other questions for Tyler? Are the applicants here
I
that would
need to
like?
make a quick comment to update the room that they have joined us by Microsoft Teams, but they were not, due to our technology, they did not join the meeting immediately. It was a few minutes before they joined. So they missed part of the beginning of your presentation, Tyler. But
Okay.
I believe that they are present by the Microsoft Teams access.
Okay, so if they start talking, we can hear them? All right, so I think it's
Okay.
Andy and Stephanie, I believe, that are on.
Okay, Andy and Stephanie, do you have any comments or things you'd like to say? Hello? Anthony and Stephanie are not there.
Yeah, this is Andy Gabbard.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. Hi, welcome to the meeting.
No, just that was a really great presentation. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Apparently he can't hear us though.
You can? Okay, great. Just making sure. I think there is a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, there may be.
Okay, wow, there's a really big delay. That's really weird. So I don't have anything else to add. But if you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any?
Andy, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Andy, did you want to speak to the environmental part? I don't know if you heard what I had said about that or not, but the report was there and it kind of left it up in the air because there's not a whole lot of historical data to go off of.
So everything that I've been able to talk to the environmental scientists about was that the location of the landfill was kind of more towards the south end of the site, outside of where we're proposing our property. Our geotech did not find anything as part of their go on mute. They did not find anything as far as that would be detrimental in where we're building our building. But obviously, we are aware of it, and we are looking to, obviously, we'll have to make any on-site modifications as we get into the soils.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much for your cooperation and participation. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this?
Yeah, I guess just briefly.
Okay, and would you tell us your name and your address?
Yep, my name's Scott Hudson. I live at 1716 Mill Street, so just to the west of this property. So as Tyler mentioned in there, living close to there, and then I'm the director of the secondary schools, the secondary campus. Traffic would be one concern with that intersection, and just additional use that would come with commercial property right there. And then the proximity to the school with just a commercial business. I don't want to see our kids end up in situations dealing with theft or possession of things they shouldn't have at school as a result of just easy access there at school. So those are my top two concerns.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Tom Odle. I'm the owner of that property. Two things. We did do a phase 2 study back in '99. It came up clean. I do have that study if it's something that somebody needs to see. On the access, on the sidewalk coming in on the east side that you showed with the green sidewalk, there is a 10-foot dead zone between the school's property and my property that has never been spoken for. So,
Good place for a sidewalk.
honestly, that's what ought to happen there, is it ought to be put into a walkway. And what it is, it's basically that side hill is basically a dead zone. Nobody owns that property. So I just want to make that aware. So to me, that's what ought to happen there, is there ought to be a walkway put in there. It'd be really simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, other than that, that's about all I really have. So,
Okay.
thank you.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Tom. Okay. Are there any other questions from the commission?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Could you put those motions back up there for reference so that we kind of... So if we could entertain a motion with those in mind, or something added or deleted, or but kind of along the lines of the displayed recommendations, I would entertain a motion in a second.
Trying to figure out how to word this. I guess the easiest way to do this is I move we approve the minor subdivision of the Odle secondary subdivision with the suggestions from staff.
Okay, yeah.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and we'll have a roll call vote on this.
Councilor Burrell,
Yes.
Councilor Spradlin,
Yes.
Mayor Sherman,
Yes.
Chairman Oakley.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. So I will close the public hearing on the minor subdivision, and then we'll move on to item B, which is a right-of-way vacation. And we'll have Tyler give our staff report.
Yeah, and you guys are welcome to head out unless you want to stick around.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, scroll down my notes here real quick.
Thanks, Scott, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're gonna jump off and I think we're good.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's quite a long delay. wasn't it?
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so this request, unusual request, we don't see these very often, but nonetheless, we have it. So Black Thunder Investment Properties LLC has submitted an application requesting the vacation of a public right-of-way of North Custer Street and North Cameron Street in the Brush Business Park subdivision. The subdivision is currently made up of 4 parcels, 3 of which are outlined in red there, are currently owned by Black Thunder Investment Properties LLC. I'll come back to that now, and then the arrows, those are the right-of-ways that they are requesting vacation within the boundaries of the road there. If you're not sure what a right-of-way is, or the technical definition there, means the entire dedicated tract or strip of land, a portion of which is to be used by the public for circulation or utilities. And just like our last topic, City Code does provide guidelines for the request here, section 16-9-30, which is part of the plat correction amendment aspect. It's the only place in our code that speaks about vacating right-of-ways. Basically says that applications are governed by this section if one or more of the criteria in the next part is met, and then also those are governed by and must meet the requirements of the Colorado revised statutes. And so those 2 parts, this is our whole section there of the plat correction amendment that goes over all that. So it's got the applicability, submittal requirements, and the procedure involved. So compatibility, this goes back to the 4 things I was talking about, that it has to comply with just one of those. So I would say that it does meet one, at least 2 of them. The first one talks about if it amends a plat for the purpose of a minor lot line boundary adjustment involving no more than 2 contiguous lots, parcels, or tracts, provided that no new non-conforming lots, parcels, or tracts are created. My explanation about it is directly underneath that since the lots are all currently served by existing public roads on the perimeter, then the area of the right-of-way would be absorbed equally into the 2 existing parcels, and essentially the center line of the existing right-of-way would be the boundary for the properties. There would be no requirement for consolidation of the properties themselves. That'd be a different process or a different request. And then arguably the second one as well about just minimal land use impact. That's subjective, but it could potentially be that. So either way, compatibility, it qualifies for this. And I talked with Dan Krob, our attorney, about that, and he agreed as well. And then the second part of that, just complying with Colorado revised statute, that just means the definitions here. This is all it states there. The definitions of block, owner, and roadway, that this is indeed one of those things, and it is. So the submittal requirements on this, basically the director, much like the last one, has the discretion to waive any elements of this. So there's a few things that they're supposed to typically submit as part of amending a plat. However, this one is a simple question. Will the city support this right-of-way vacation, yes or no? And so we're allowing the applicant to forego submitting those required documents until they find out yes or no. And that way they don't have to spend any unnecessary time or money on something to find out whether it's going to work or not. And so if it's something that ultimately does get approved, then that approval will have those conditions on it, as well as any other ones that might be tied to it. So in other words, yes, we approve, but that approval is conditioned upon a plat that meets all the necessary requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So the procedure in this, I think this is actually an error probably in our land use code. The procedure is an administrative process, meaning that I'm the one that would say yes or no to it. But this, and I talked with our attorney about this as well, we both agree this is above my pay grade. And so that's why it's coming before the planning commission and then ultimately city council. So the location and history on this is the original plat that was done. So back in 97 is when this was annexed, and when the annexation came in, this is what happened. So it was divided into two properties. This one was actually supposed to be sold off to what was known as a prison, and then this was supposed to be some mixed-use development, commercial and industrial here. That never really came to fruition overall. And then in 2004, it was further subdivided, so from the 3 parcels into the 2 parcels. And at this time is when these right-of-ways were added, because this whole subdivision at this point was tied directly to a concept plan. This was the plan, the Brush Business Park. This was what we have on file here, of what they were looking to do. So you can see here, these are the 3 lots, and so they were looking at running these roads in here, having all these different lots subdivided. And so it made sense, of course, to put these Custer Street and Cameron Street for access and circulation through there. So again, this subdivision was centered around this concept overall. And then with that concept, there was an agreement that was in place between the city and the developers at that time, and it was tied to the execution of that development. And it was stated that the agreement would be null and void if the Brush Business Park did not begin within 1 year. And it was never really determined what begin means in the agreement, but it would seem that it would be tied to the lots being sold, which at that point would have required a further subdivision of the properties. A subdivision was done the following December for one property there. And it was only subdivided to extend the use of the property to the south overall, so it didn't really have anything to do with all the planned stuff that the concept had in place. And so after looking through those documents, that being the only element of activity that would resemble what seemed to be the intent of the development the agreement was connected to, my conclusion is that based on the lack of implementation of that concept plan accompanying the correspondence and the documentation of the agreement, that agreement has no weight on the continuation of any requirements therein. So furthermore, it would seem that the agreement was actually never recorded and thus likely never conveyed with subsequent purchases of the property, meaning that property owners in the future were never actually made aware of that agreement until digging was done at the city level where we uncovered it. So as such, we are left right where the city was prior to that agreement, where you have lots privately being held with a preliminary plan for development for a portion of the properties, and the city in the position to set expectations for public improvements while working with the developer on creating a reasonable plan. Now, there is language on the plat down here in the corner. Of course, you can't read it, which was restated on it was in the original one and then in each subsequent plats thereafter. And it says, quote, no more than 10% of the occupancy permits will be issued by officials of the city for improvements of any nature on any property reflected on this platted subdivision until such time as the acceptance, as herein described, has been filed for record with the clerk of the city, end quote. And I looked at other historical plats that we have, and that seemed to be standard language that was put in on all plats. But given that there are only 4 lots there right now, and 10% is not connected to any base number, that requirement really has no basis for application, and any revisions on this plat going forward should probably remove that language to eliminate any confusion. So the current request, to kind of dive into the meat of all this right here, the current owner acquired the property in April of 2022, and they have been in discussion with the city staff prior to closing on the property to determine uses and requirements. The discussions have circled around an RV park on block number 3 and a self-storage facility on a portion of either block 1 or 2. As the conversations for potential development have taken shape, the responses of both the owner and the city have shifted in response to what kind of standards and requirements and plans would be implemented based on location, history, intended use, planning and integration of future development, and what city code states. The initial discussion of an RV park, which was originally submitted to the city as a planned unit development because the city code didn't have sufficient standards for an RV park, that actually helped the city develop standards for an RV park that we adopted earlier this year. However, the property owner decided that the RV development would need to take a back seat to the self-storage concept, as the self-storage concept would provide a lesser upfront cost and provide a cash flow that can in turn help fund the RV park. A sketch plan was submitted for comments to the city, and as the desired location for the development was on the south side of the property. So if you can see here, these are the properties that go right up against Industrial Park Road here. So the southern portion of this property, so basically across there is where that's located at. So they submitted that to us overall, and so we're looking at elements of that with them, and access to the property, of course, would be necessary, and the only way to get to that would be through the public right-of-way, from here or over here, or both. That be the case, if you've driven out here at all, there's nothing existing there. Some kind of dirt-ish road, definitely not gravel, was put in by the city years ago. There's some history there about an old pork plant and running water and sewer lines. There's water and sewer lines that do run through here. Don't think any run through here, but there are easements on both sides for those utilities. But again, with that being located there, according to the city standards, this road would need to be improved up to city standards. And a cost estimate was done by the city's engineer in February of 2023 for the road to be constructed from Industrial Park Road to where the current road exists to the north side. So from up here southward, about 750 feet, and the cost on that was roughly $300,000. And so through discussion, the owner determined that the cost of the roadway improvements would prohibit the project from moving forward. We spoke with them about different alternative avenues, including deferring road construction for 5 years and then having a suitable temporary road. We also spoke about implementing a trigger, at which point the road would need to be constructed like a future subdivision, as an example. We also spoke about the possibility of implementing payback agreements with adjacent future property development. So if they did a road and then something developed over here, that in order to get a CO here, they would have to contribute, per linear foot or something like that, as an option. Talked about phasing the construction of the road, but a requirement tied to each idea is the city's necessity to ensure the completion of the roadway if the developer was ultimately unable to perform the obligation. And our requirement for financial security to satisfy that guarantee is a financial risk that the property owner is unwilling to take. So in light of these discussions ultimately not yielding the progress that they're looking for, the request for vacation is the only avenue that could be a mutually agreed upon solution. That was a catalyst to bring that to the Planning Commission here tonight. If not approved, the applicant has clearly stated that they cannot financially justify either of the projects and will put the properties on the market to sell. So the vacation of a public right-of-way would be the city giving up a property right that it deemed in the best interest of the public use. And so in this instance, as a requirement for approval of the replat back in September of 2005, for future planning, property access, vehicular circulation, it made sense to put the public right-of-ways in as a continuation of those north to south roads of Custer and Cameron. A vacation of these right-of-ways would potentially severely limit the city's ability to implement access and circulation according to city standards for future development in between the properties. It is possible to gain these right-of-ways back or in a similar intended form through a future public process like subdivision, but it's not a guarantee. So for those reasons, I spoke with our city attorney about it, and he made it clear through discussion of the situation that he does not recommend supporting the applicant's request. As part of the application, or as part of the submittal, there's a formal memo from the attorney included. But the properties, looking back at the bigger picture here, so the properties themselves that would be directly impacted, obviously, are Block 1 here, Block 2, and Block 3. There is access to all these properties there, as well as technically up here and right there as well. Due to the size of the properties, there is tremendous potential and opportunity for development. It's almost a clean slate as far as what you could do out there. The parcels could be subdivided for a lot of different uses. They could be used as 3 different parcels for three different uses. They could even be combined for one large singular use. All possibilities would have a variety of access impacts and needs based on how they would be utilized and laid out. However, the properties are privately held, and the owner of the property ultimately determines those outcomes. It is important to distinguish that conceptual ideas for unknowns can be very different in application from what actually happens. In other words, planning is important, but things may not unfold according to plan, such as the 2004 Brush Business Park. So although a variety of plans for the property have taken place since 1997, as you probably know, nothing has come to fruition out there. And so currently, the city has an opportunity for use of a portion of the land, but it does come with a request that the property owner has deemed the only feasible means of going forward with their project. So the proposed project of a storage facility would be required to go through a special use permit process where the required conditions would be applied if approved. Access would be a consideration for part of the conditions, and if there was no public right-of-way, the access would be required to build to a minimum standard to ensure emergency services can get in and out of the site. Any future uses of the property could necessitate further conditions, including the reestablishment of right-of-ways. So in conclusion, it simply needs to be determined if these existing right-of-ways are necessary or preferred. As with all development, cost is a primary factor for the feasibility of a project. The city seeks to be sensitive to that factor and flexible where it can be, while working to ensure that the adopted city code is upheld, that we are being relatively consistent, reasonable, and ultimately acting in the best interests of the community. Staff does not have a recommendation for approval or denial of this request for the vacation of right-of-ways, and it looks to Planning Commission. So options for Planning Commission include denying the application, approving the request with no conditions, approving the request with conditions, or continue the request subject to additional information. Any questions?
So they own the whole thing,
Correct.
and they have
own, well,
those 3
yeah,
lots.
again, there's a little corner that they don't own right there, but yeah, we'll just, for the sake of argument, yes.
And they have plans, so it would basically all flow together as one big property instead of
No, it would
3
remain
separate.
3 properties, and so the right-of-ways here, essentially, there would be, if you were to draw a line right in the middle of where the road basically is, that would get absorbed by both sides.
So that would become more of a private access,
A private
basic,
road.
instead of a
I'd
public
still
right of
build the
way.
roads and everything on both of them, even though the one doesn't even exist. And it can still be a through road, but I would build them.
It's
And-
not pavement.
Yeah.
For, I guess formality, the questions are for me now, and you guys get a chance to
Oh,
speak. and then you
okay.
can- Yeah.
Okay, so there would still be access through there.
Correct. Well, it depends on what they would want to do and the requirements in place. So if you got rid of those right-of-ways, there would be no access on a plat there. So right now, there's dedicated public access on the plats, and so they're asking for the removal of those. It would still exist here, because that's not within the subdivision. So in theory, public could access through here still, and then however they configure that would be a determinant. It's right on the property line, so that would, you have to figure out something there.
But access for emergency vehicles would be a requirement.
Absolutely.
And you did say that the city does have possibly water and sewer in the easement on the left?
Yeah, I should have put that up on the map, but it is there. I've looked at our lines. And there's an easement, if it's not through here, the easement itself actually might be wider than the road, I can't remember. Short answer, yes.
So on the replat drawing from 2007, anyway, on the one you have up there, it does spell out that there's a right-of-way on Custer Street, but it does not spell out a right-of-way on Cameron Street.
That's for the utilities. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I'm thinking about easements. Are you talking about down here in the notes then, is what it states?
Well, I'm just saying if you look at the drawing, the roadway or the right-of-way that is shown on the drawing between Block 1 and Block 2,
Yes.
Custer Street.
Correct.
If you go up, it states there that that is a right-of-way. If you look,
Yeah.
you see what I'm
This part
saying?
right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Whereas on the one for Cameron Street, it doesn't indicate that that is a right-of-way.
In the, let me look through my plat here a little bit closer since I can't read that. So the statement, I guess, behind your question is that there.
Is there an
Definitely
actual
is.
right-of-way on the Cameron Street?
Well, as far as I know, there is, looking through
So
the notice on
if,
there.
if it's in the documents, what takes precedent there, the drawing or the document?
The document.
Okay. So if it's written out in the document, is that possible that it,
Oh, I see what you're saying. You mean the one and the same, not a separate drawing. So this is all
Correct.
one, so is this accurate, but if it's not reflected in there?
well, I'm just saying,
Yeah, I-
you know,
I see what
if
you're
you
saying.
look at the drawing, it doesn't say that there's an actual right-of-way on Custer, or Carson, or I'm sorry, Cameron.
Too many
All
C's.
those C's in there.
Yeah, good question. I guess the implication is that was intended to be one.
Because it doesn't show any utilities or anything in that, in the drawing, but,
It does have boundaries on here, though, for the properties themselves. And it has a 60-foot up there, denoting that it's a 60-foot width, and so. Good question. That's almost an attorney question there.
yeah, I just noticed that, but,
Now, I would say it is, because up here, looking at it now, that does not speak about, that says that 20-foot easement and right-of-way to the city of Brush as described in there. And so I would guess that the easement itself is why that's called out like that, because there's an easement within the right-of-way. So I was wrong. I was thinking the easement was wider, it's only 20 feet. So the easement is within the right-of-way.
that says that on Road 27.5?
No, on Custer Street.
Yes, yeah. But I'm just saying that there's no statement to that fact concerning Cameron.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So we'll seek legal clarification on that.
Has it been looked into just to gain access off of T5 or off of T
We did speak about that.
and then not have to have a city street?
Yeah, so like right here, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a possibility. We did speak about that. We did confirm with the county. Both I spoke with them and the applicant spoke with Nicole, or at least her office over there in planning and zoning, and then Nicole pointed us to road and bridge. And they said, yeah, that's something that can be done through the proper procedure.
So wouldn't that kind of kill two birds with one stone?
Well,
Keep these right-of-ways and,
so they're wanting to put it down here for topography reasons, and so they'd have to bring a road all the way through that property, so there's more cost there. In theory, they could move it up there as well, and then leave it as is, and then address the rest of this.
well, I'm just curious, like, so if they put it where they intended to put it, would the road coming from T have to meet city standards, or since it's on private property, could it just be a dirt road?
It could just be a dirt road, correct, but it'd still be a significant cost for that far. I don't know what the cost would be, but that's really on the applicants. I don't want to speak for
Like, I was just
them.
curious if that avenue had been looked into.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
So if the right-of-ways are vacated, what's the cost to the city? I mean, all they have invested is the utilities, right?
Well, I mean, utilities would remain, we've spoken about that, we would still require that easement.
The easement, but not the right-of-way.
Correct. So what would it cost the city, like financially or just practically?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's been vacant out there for 25 years and nothing has ever happened.
So the cost on the city, financially, there'd be no cost to the city overall. Obviously, the city overall would like to see development happen do something happen out there, see property tax generate, whatever, maybe spur additional development, who knows? The attorney in his memo in there spoke about the cost in like an intangible way. Is more so that we lose control over those right-of-ways and potentially forever. So, as an example, if they wanted to, let's say, develop each of these out separately and have access from Road T there, is that any internal subdivision would be lost as far as us being able to be involved, saying, well, there's already a road there, so therefore X, Y, and Z. This lays out the framework for development for us that we have a say in to ensure things are up to city standards, so we just forego that, potentially never getting them back. I made the comment in there about we could potentially get it back because if they, for instance, wanted to put their project up here and they got the rest of this, however many acres, and someone came along and saying, hey, I want to do something here, they would be required to subdivide it at that point. And so it would come back to the city, and so as part of the requirement, we would say we have to put in a right-of-way, whether here or somewhere else where it made sense.
Have you had conversation with the Danielsons about maybe a trigger mechanism or some of those other options? I mean, would any of those have potential possibilities to make it work? The pushback, if I can put it that way, was still tied to what we typically require for guarantees, that if, let's say they go here with their plan and we allow them to have a private road, but if anyone else wants to come up here and do a subdivision, because we have this right-of-way for them to access through here to then that property, in order to be consistent, we want this road to be up to city standards. And so it would then require, we wouldn't want just a portion of that up to city standards, we would want all of it up to a certain point up to city standards. And so with that, they would be required to put up some kind of letter of credit or whatever it may be, so the city would have access to those funds if they weren't able to perform on their side of things. So that puts financial obligation on them that they didn't want to take on.
So, I mean, right now, we don't know if they have any plans to subdivide it.
Correct. There's so many things you can do out there, it's difficult to say. Because you could subdivide.
I mean,
this
and
into
they
20
thought they were
different
gonna do
parcels.
something with it back in 1997, and
Correct.
nobody did. I mean, to just hinge on what may or may not happen just seems hindering, you know?
So we're basically wanting to vacate these right-of-ways strictly to save the cost of the building the road into accessing that particular property. That's the whole purpose of this.
Correct.
Is there not a way we can, trying to figure out a way to tie this in with the fact that the city has utilities there?
Yeah, the utilities will dictate a lot of the development in the future, because you're not going to build a building right over a sewer line unless you realign the sewer.
So can any future subdivision, and I think this is kind of what you were just saying, any future subdivision would require roads to go in?
In theory, but even then, it may not be, because you could, again, it's a blank slate, because you do have access, again, on the whole perimeter, technically speaking. I mean, it makes sense for the roads to go through if you just stick with what we typically do around the city, the grids and that kind of stuff. That's a given overall. So if we subdivided this into 5 parcels here, and all of them had access here, and they don't need this road, and this is one big user in the future, yeah, in theory. Again, it's all contingent upon how you divide the whole thing up.
Do we have to vacate both right-of-ways?
No, it's not necessary, but it's requested by the applicant right now, because the RV park right now, they would phase it in. I'll let them speak any details that they want to, but any development along this road, it goes through a special use permit process, and so typically we would, because they may not even utilize this, but at some point someone's got the idea someone has to build this road for access.
But if there's another access to the RV park, then...
Yeah, because, to Justin's point earlier, could they access here? Sure. Yeah, they could go through the county and get access to that. But that's in county, this is in city limits, and so really it's city council's determined at that point for the special use permit what would be required. Staff would have recommendations for it, and a lot of that goes back to city code and consistency, what we've required elsewhere.
I think that's the challenge, you know, like with Love's, they had to build Cotton Street and put that in there. The CLP guys, local farmers that got together and did that, they had to build streets out into the agri park. So I think that just goes along with development. There's so much infrastructure that you have to anticipate for development. And if there were no utilities, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much, but I feel once there's utilities there, there's been a plan to put in a road, or there's existing right-of-way, and the attorney's recommending against it, you know, that's what worries me more than anything else. Because the next developers that come in and want to develop, you have others that want to annex in, and we're telling them, if you're going to develop, you got to put in a road, and stormwater, and utilities. So that's the hard part, is trying to keep a consistent land use program, but changing the rules for different individuals.
But this is all privately owned property here. I mean, and you can still have your easements for the utilities, but, I mean, like out at the port plant out that way, I mean, the city owned that.
And they paid for the improvements, the roads. The city didn't pay. That was just
That's what I'm
part of it.
saying, but it was city owned, not privately owned property.
Yeah. Well, that's my opinion, I'm just saying.
So they could, I mean, if they developed it further, they could require any future development to help them pay for any roads that they would need to accommodate any future growth.
Yeah, I'm curious why we even have to do a trigger mechanism. I mean, even if we kept the easements in place, the landowner themselves could require whoever uses the next portion of property to build the entire road. Like, that could just be a condition of sale.
Right, and I guess the challenge with that is that you're kind of, the further away from here, we'll say that you get on having a non-city standard road, the more expensive it's going to be for everyone else. So that's a deterrent for future development.
Well, so is taking away the easements, in my opinion.
Well,
Because you're taking away access to city water and sewer through one aspect of one lot, possibly the other side of the lot.
are you referring to easements or
Or
right-of-ways?
you're taking away, with the one right-of-way and easement that has the city sewer and water, that if you subdivided block one, or the rest of block 2, you've made that more challenging now in the aspects of getting to city utilities.
So
The city streets are a very easy way to convey stormwater, water lines, sewer lines.
correct.
So,
But you still have access through the easement. I mean, if you needed to.
you have access to the easement, but I guess the way I'm looking at this is like if it was platted off, in multiple lots, getting those utilities to those lots, it's easier to convey that through a city street. You see what I'm saying? Rather than just in the middle of a dirt field. So, and then, I guess I'm really unfamiliar with what's on the west side of block 2 or block 1 there.
Over here is
That's
it's out of city limits.
Oh, okay, so it's not even
That's
that.
27.
Yeah, there's a proposed solar farm going on here, 46 acres or so.
So Cameron Street, does it go through?
Mm-mm.
So it's not even a road now,
No,
Yeah, there's nothing there, whereas Custer has a dirt road that goes.
a dirt road.
a trail.
Trail, sure, yeah.
Okay. So it's not a road that we're using now.
No,
And
it's
if
not a
they
city
develop
road.
there,
I think
there's
the city
access
put it in
to
a long time
everything.
ago. Someone went through with a plow or something. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what the history is on that specific.
I mean, they're looking at bigger projects, not putting a bunch of houses, but a bigger project that would only need, you know, 1 or 2 access points.
Right now, everything is zoned industrial up there. In theory, someone could request a zoning change at some point, but ever since it's been brought in, it's been commercial. This one, I'm clarifying, this one's commercial, these 2 are industrial. This one being right along Highway 71.
Can we have the Danielsons, do you have anything to say in reference to any input? If you want to come up to the
Okay.
podium.
Yeah, like the roads, you know, we want to vacate, but I'd still build the roads. I mean, they'd be way better than what's out there now. I mean, I'd do the chipped asphalt and stuff, widen it and stuff to the same size as the city street and stuff, and I'd maintain it better, I hate to say it, than what's out there now. I mean, all the industrial park streets need a lot of work to it. There's potholes and cracks and everywhere, where I guarantee mine 2 would look way better than that. It's just, that's just my makeup. I'm just that picky on stuff like that.
So if you're gonna put the roads
So-
in anyway, what are you hoping to accomplish by vacating the right of way?
I cannot afford 300,000 for 750 feet of road. And you'd have to, if you go out there, if there is the city sewer line in the middle of that one, I'm told by Dale that it's not at grade, so it needs to be lowered. So the city needs to lower that before a road could even be built there, to have the water flow the correct way. Otherwise, if you go out there and survey it, it's like a 4-foot jump. If you, because it's a hump right there.
And our whole thing is.
So we build the road, and then all of a sudden you got this 4-foot jump to meet the rest of the dirt road. So that part doesn't make sense at this point in time.
So, let me ask you this question, just purely because I'm completely unfamiliar with the property. Why do you have to go 750 feet to the entrance?
That's what
That's
they're
what we're told
required.
from the city.
Yeah.
That would take it from Industrial Park Road to County Road T.
No, it
No,
would
No.
take to.
just to the end of
To
the
here.
property.
Right there.
Oh, to the end of the property.
And that's
Of the
where,
storage units, but we'd like to further it out later.
at the end of that storage unit, that's where the road
Oh,
winds.
okay.
That's
So
where
is
the
that
city-
between 1 and 2? Or is that, where's that, right
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So that would just be half of Custer then, that, or approximately, that would be done to city standards?
Probably roughly right around here. So this part's not constructed to city standards. It's right down, almost to where Industrial Park Road is. So from there up to about there.
And that has never been done by the people who are there now, the
Yeah,
business.
the
So,
2 businesses on each
That's
side,
not-
so that they should incur some of that cost anyhow.
or, you know, they're not doing it, so, not to gaslight, but, and it's like, we just want to do 2 new businesses, bring good business to Brush. We appreciate the code for the RV park. We just had to, because that was in process, we decided we're going to start with the storage units. They're much quicker to go up. We can get some revenue going, fund the storage units, get rid of the prairie dogs. We just really would like to benefit Brush. And the thing is, the trigger point, they talked about a letter of credit of $300,000. It's like, we're just not comfortable giving the city an open checkbook
Well,
for $300,000.
like even for the RV park, that's the structure for the service building there.
Yeah,
So
so,
I got an estimate on that from Keith's Construction to build that, and it's a unique design that I want to do there to make it really cool looking for
and
something else.
expanding the storage units further north. Once they fill up, then we can expand. We'll just see how that all goes before we make that decision to be fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
We need a return on investment.
Lot 2 and Lot 3, I have no plans of ever breaking them up. They will be one whole lot.
Each.
So block 1, if you ever decided to subdivide that,
It's up
It's
for
for
sale
sale
right
right
now.
now.
Oh,
And
okay.
I got a buyer that's looking at it,
It's just the topography on that is
Mhm.
not as good as the other 2 being flatter. It'd be a lot more
so that one
cost-efficient.
doesn't really affect you and once you sell it.
I still feel like the city has the power to make both of these things happen. Like, keep the easements there and just not make them build the stinking road. Like, there's gotta be a way to make.
Just maybe like
You
a
have full
driveway.
access,
your own-
you have full access.
Clarification, this is not to get rid of the easements, just the right-of-ways. The easement would stay.
The right of way,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm mixing terms.
For emergency
So,
vehicles.
I don't have any heartburn about Cameron Street, like, I don't have any heartburn about that at all. But I do have heartburn when it comes to the Custer Street, because there's existing utilities, and, you know, I don't wanna go against what our lawyer tells us to do.
Gotcha.
But given that, especially too, if you're gonna be selling the other block, then there's yet another need for yet another road.
Well, they can access it
Off
from
the
the
county
county
road.
road,
Mm-hmm.
so.
So, I mean,
Well, and that could, I mean, whoever buys it could subdivide it, and that could be, you
That could be
know,
their trigger.
that could be their,
But, yeah,
Then they gotta pay for the road.
I guess it depends on what they need to do
Unless
with
they
it.
come
If
off
it's
a
just
road-
gonna be industrial,
the
you
county
know,
road,
I don't
yeah.
know.
it's just, we'd like to
It
get
just seems
something
a
done.
lot
I
to expect when we are trying to encourage growth, you know?
agree, and I feel like that's where we have the power to say, keep the
Keep the easement.
e-
The easement.
right of ways, the right of ways, and just figure out a way to waive the portion, just that short little portion to their drive until something else out there happens. And I don't even know why we would have to maintain a letter of credit, because like I said, in the sale of any of those properties in the future, that could all just be.
it sounds like it needs to be a question for Dan then on,
And he references that exact thing in his memo that he put in there as an example. And we had talked about this, we being myself and the Danielsons, is that if they were able to, if they did a private road, let's say from here up until that access point, and they maintained it as a private road, Dan's recommendation was the trigger being, you know, something happening over here or up there. But the issue is that this would then have to get made into a city standard road at some point, whatever that trigger is. It wouldn't be just private road and then public road again. It'd have to be a public road, and the public road would have to be brought up to standards. And still, at that point, the cost would still, it may be split or something if something else happened,
So,
but it would still
Justin,
fall back on
that's
that.
second paragraph on page 2 from that memo. He covers it quite well, what you're asking.
I don't know, I think, my opinion is that the city may have jumped the gun putting in those utilities there. Had they not been put in, we wouldn't be having this discussion, I don't believe.
I will say that we have benefited because they access the land plant,
Mhm.
the sewer line over there.
Oh, is that-
It goes up and then it goes across that property, and then we're tied into that.
So, and we're not talking about vacating the utility easement. That would
Correct.
still be, and there'd probably still be some
You're
sort of
just-
a road there.
It'd just look nice if it was better maintained and done right,
And for
and wider.
30 years, nothing's happened. I
Yeah.
mean, they've
Right.
been the same
And
way,
if we
there's
keep doing
access,
this-
people going through, nobody maintains it.
And if we keep doing this, nothing's gonna happen. We have to stop doing
Yeah.
this.
Well, I just gotta back up and say, if I was informed when I was looking at this property, that we'd have to do these roads, I would've never bought the
That's why we
property.
came to the city in the first place.
We were told just the opposite, so.
I would hate to see the city miss out on new businesses and the economic benefit that the city would have with something happening out there.
Mhm.
Especially an RV park is gonna bring people from all over, you know, and the access is really easy, so hopefully that would spur other businesses to do something.
Well, and just the taps, all these utilities been sitting there forever.
Yeah.
We buy taps for sewer for the storage system and a water tap, and then the RV park's gotta have water for the whole park
Taxes will be-
and sewer. So there's some more taps there, plus the structures for tax purpose. Right now, it
Yeah.
doesn't look that pretty out there. It could at least look a lot better now.
I still like Dan's suggestion. I think that it's probably gonna be the best route with the utilities already being there and already going to another business.
But
Well, they would still have access
So,
to
I'm
We
it.
don't
sure-
have those.
Yeah, they'll still have access.
Right. Well, I'm sure you guys haven't seen this, but the way that it was worded to us was the city could enter into a revocable access agreement whereby the developer is not required to improve the row at this point in time, but can use the row as a privately maintained access for their proposed business unless and until the city needs the row as a public street or for another public purpose, such as if Block 1 sells and they divide it up, and that could be an example. This solution would allow the city to maintain its property interest in its row and allow the developer to avoid the cost of improving the row to the required city road standards.
But then if you keep reading that, he then talks about at the time when it would need to happen, that then the cost, they would be required at that point to bring it in business.
Which at that time, they will have already established their business and been in generating revenue. And I don't see, as we've discussed, this has been going on since '97, I don't see us needing this row anytime soon. That could be contingent upon what Block 1 decides to do once they purchase the property, of course. But I think by that point, revenue will already have been generated. You'll have your storage facility, you'll potentially have your RV park. By the time that we would potentially ask for it, you would have the
Then
income.
we'd go backwards then on our
On
revenue,
the
and our cash flow.
300,000.
Well, and then
If we're
we
talking
could share the
just-
cost with Block 1. I feel like the Cameron Street one isn't an issue.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the Custer Street, and it's still an access. It's just not gonna be a public road.
It's not gonna be a pub, there's no,
I don't-
it's never
'Cause
been
by-
accepted by the city, there's not street signs up.
Yeah, we're
it's
not maintaining it
maintained by
now.
the city. You're not losing, I mean,
So what is your reasoning for not wanting to bring the access off of T?
Oh, we can.
We
And just
can.
do your own private access
we could
there?
do it that way and
I've
build
done
a
it many
boating
times with other
properties.
properties, and it's not that hard to do with the
So
county.
if that's, as long as we could get rid of the, vacate the Cameron and not even worry about that, we could come off of T. Because it's like, what, 600 feet from 71 that we have to,
Because you were thinking about extending to the north anyway, correct?
at some point, yeah, we.
Because that would kill two birds with one stone. If you came off at T and we could leave the Custer Street right of way there and vacate the Cameron Street, because it sounds like, you're gonna do, hopefully, the RV park in Block 3, correct? Storage in Block 2. And that would leave a right of way for something possibly to come into Block 1. And that could be subdivided however in the future.
I was wondering what you were looking at. I didn't see it.
Just looking at the state.
So I guess speaking to that again from a city planning standpoint, typically what we would do, and again, I will go through the special use permit, and so the council would be the ones to say yea or nay on whatever conditions, but normally for kind of development, help them pay their own way sort of thing, is because they would be going down this way, and they're the first ones there, that's always the kind of the risk in that, is that you typically would require improvements adjacent to.
Don't even come in off, right there, come in off.
Well,
the center
yeah,
of the
exactly,
property.
but, yeah, I understand that, but as a means of continuation is, you're just pushing that cost on that person, making it harder for it to come down in the future, as opposed to, that's kind of Dan's argument altogether, is that the city maintains control over that, then we put requirements, okay, then you need to do, if this is 300 feet deep, then you need to do 300 feet of road. That way the next people come in, they can do their portion of the road.
We don't have to ever require a road there, though.
Say that again?
We never have to even require a road there.
No, we don't, correct, but
So-
from a planning purpose, it's kind of like, you just kick the can down the road, I guess, for those requirements.
I don't have a problem kicking the can down the road for
Because
people
we've
that
got the
want to
can
do something
right
with
now.
it.
Yeah, the can's been kicked to them, it wasn't done here by these guys, the can was kicked. These guys who started the whole thing, they were supposed to have done it, that was never,
And I don't
established
think
by the
we should
city
be
and the
held to
corporation.
that.
They
I
got
just
kicked
really
down the road.
disagree with that because, I mean, if they weren't aware of it, it didn't happen in '97, it didn't happen in 2005. We finally have somebody that wants to do something with it.
I mean, this is,
I just think that we need a fresh start and we need to just, there's gotta be some sort of,
a spark.
And we're self-funding it. We can do it. We're self-funding it, and we're not a multi-million-dollar corporation like Love's and
Yeah.
Love's Plant.
Sure. Well, this is no
We're mom and
different
pop.
than like what we're dealing with off Mill Street to the school district. I mean, they're accessing their property right off of a city street using just dirt. So if they access their property off of County Road T, and they could kick the can to whoever buys Block 1. You know what I mean? So,
Sure, and that's really upon, city council if they want to kick
Trying
it
to-
in, as you refer to overall. So.
I'm trying to make,
Yeah, and I get it. I want to see development happen as well.
yeah, the right-of-way makes sense to me on Custer. It doesn't make sense to me on Cameron.
Agreed.
But if we could figure out a solution to accessing and to where they could still do what they wanted to do, but not require the Custer Street road improvement at this time. Because we got two things going on here. We're either gonna lose what's gonna go out there completely, or we're gonna lose the right of way. So if we can make both those things happen, keep the right of way, and get the improvements to happen, I feel like that's the avenue we should go after. And if whoever purchases Block 1 wants to access their property off of County Road T, then that never needs to be a road. But we still have the possibility of, in the future, if it ever needs to be.
Either that or, with me, I like stuff to look nice. That's why I just soon do the roads right. I just can't pave them, widen them, make them compact enough for a fire truck can go down and get to all the fire hydrants and stuff. You got your flow through there, like you guys want. And then if there is a trigger point, like, let's just say I'd agree to, if I ever want to subdivide Lot 2, which that will never happen, then I'll pave a street. But I don't plan on subdividing. It will all be a storage system. It'll be one big lot.
Yeah, and to me, I just don't see why that needs an improved road.
Yeah,
Next.
and we have plenty of other storage units in town that do not have improved roads through them.
And
Tends to be
Dan, in
broken
his
RV
suggestion, is
storage.
not saying that it has to be an improved road. He's not saying that they have to develop it, his suggestion perfectly fits what you're trying to do.
Yeah, just,
So we could leave
Yeah,
it right
that's
away
what we needed
on
too.
Custer Street,
No, I,
just not require them to pave it at this time.
yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Like, I get from the city standpoint, I get what our ordinance says, and I get what Tyler's saying about future incurred costs. But say for suggestion that whoever purchases Block 1 is a multi-million-dollar corporation, let them deal with the road.
yeah.
You know what I
different
mean?
story.
So, I don't know. I want to make both things happen
Something
somehow.
moving.
I guess we just need to figure out the best way to do that.
Yeah, so do I, but I don't have the authority to make that call. That's why.
That's why we're here.
So do we need a motion?
So, do we need to have this like reworded so that
Well,
we just
or
do
we
that
could-
in the motion?
Or we could just take a motion that allow them to vacate the Cameron Street right-of-way?
Yeah, there's no template for you guys to go off.
But we gotta
So
figure out,
Your call.
It's making a recommendation to
It's a
council.
recommendation to
Yeah.
council, yeah.
and then
But you
council
gotta-
decides what, so like where in the motion does it need to say that they don't need to improve the road?
I think
Do we
I've
need to
got
do
it.
that now, or is that something that needs to happen in council? Or is that
So-
something that needs to be?
We have to make the motion for what we're gonna recommend to council.
Correct, so based on what you're saying, kind of think that everybody's agreeing, everybody kind of seems to be saying a little bit different things, but is that Cameron Street, that you would recommend approval of the vacation of Cameron Street,
Yes.
and that's it?
No.
Because all we're talking about today is vacating,
Vacating.
so we can't really make the recommendation of,
The road
Well,
requirement,
the
that's
road
all done through a
requirement.
special use permit hearing and all that stuff for the actual use of the property. So this just has to do with the plat being changed.
So if we were to vacate the right-of-way on Custer Street, could we implement future conditions that if Block 1 was to sell, that right-of-way?
see, that's where I think it's in our best interest to keep the right of way.
We lose our
You
interest
could-
if we vacate the right of way.
You could add, going back to the whole,
Lost your
the
dog.
whole plat thing, that works. So the plat itself has language in there that really you can add all kinds of different stuff in there. I mentioned earlier about it saying that no more than 10% of permits shall be issued until public improvements are made, et cetera, which is just standard language that was put in to make no sense. So you can actually add specific kinds of requirements in the plat as a recorded document going forward. It has to be thought through pretty thoroughly, because you have to understand all the implications involved with whatever that may be. So you can go that route, which just applies to everything on the plat, or as the uses themselves come up, you can address those individually as they go through their individual permitting processes on a staff level. So I guess it wouldn't be you unless it was necessary. Sorry to keep rambling, but I say that because not everything's going to require a special use permit. Some of them will be a use by right, so there's no need to go before city council. And so at that point, it would be back on staff, if the plat doesn't say it, to make those determinations, unless it was a big enough deal, and then we had to come back to city council for some guidance. So it can get a little complex.
Well, I kind of like the idea of maybe not approving the vacation of Custer Street, but not requiring the upgrade to a paved road, and have that trigger mechanism in place of some sort, maybe, or something, so that in the future, we find the need that it does need to be paved, we would maybe have some means to do that.
But again,
That's
that's
what they
something
did in
that
1997, and
we
here
would
we are,
direct-
but they didn't do anything with it, so it doesn't really count.
We didn't
Things are
have the
changing.
performance bond at that time. So if we had the performance bond, then we could have
We would have had the money,
to do it.
yeah. But-
I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that just some rumblings that I've heard that area is going to start to
Mhm.
do some things. So that's why I guess I'm really standoffish to get rid of that one right away.
The Custer, or the
Custer.
Custer,
Street.
or Cameron.
The Custer. The Cameron one, I have no issue with that one.
And Cameron, for sure,
It's
there's no
Custer,
water
it's
lines
the
through there?
rest.
Yeah.
Cameron is
No.
right.
So interestingly enough, as a reminder, essentially, although it
Cameron
would be
wasn't
one
there
lot,
in the
this is
first
kind of
place.
what you're looking at. There's a road here, I mean, it's not the same
Trail.
thing, but yeah, a road here actually, but then it would be no right of way there.
So that's how it was to start with,
Kind of, yeah,
before it
it's
was
probably bad
subdivided.
representation, I probably shouldn't have done that. It probably caused confusion, never mind, we'll just.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like it was subdivided at some point, and we just need
It's
to.
technically two plats there, but
Yeah.
it just looks like one.
So really all we need to do here is vote to vacate the right-of-way, or direct city council to vacate the right-of-way. And then city council needs to deal with the special use permit process, or
That's a total separate one, so they would be doing.
for
the exact
whether or
same
not
thing.
we require the road. I guess I'm
We
trying to
could
figure out what to
recommend
make
that
the
they-
motion
that-
now for.
I got it.
You got it?
I got it.
She's got it, never mind.
I move that we vacate the right-of-way for Cameron Street between, what is that? I can't see that.
1 and
2 and 3.
Lots 2 and 3. I move that we do not vacate the right-of-way for Custer Street, and that we guide city council to Dan Krob's letter, which is addressed to city council, in regards to how the developer can not have to move forward with the improvements at this time
Of Custer Street.
of Custer Street.
Second.
And just to clarify, that's a recommendation to council.
Yes.
Yes.
Recommended
If I can add one more thing too, and also the removal of this language.
Ah,
Because the plat's gonna get changed, and so that needs to get taken off the plat.
In addition to that motion, based on staff suggestion, the removal of language on the plat
in the little red box.
in the lower.
Which states the 10%.
Second
Okay.
again.
Didn't say any more discussion.
So one point of question for clarity for the Danielsons. So all that sounds good, but if in the future something happens over there and Custer Street is required to be improved, will they be required to make the improvements?
That's going to be a decision for council, right? So that's going to be, because we're recommending that council read this this letter that's addressed to them and to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then make that agreement on what that trigger point is as is outlined by the attorney. And so I think that that's a conversation that needs to take place on where it's comfortable for everyone to have that trigger point, and making sure that staff is satisfied as well as the Danielsons are satisfied.
Well, and if they sell it, that could be a shared cost. And maybe be.
Is that the
in
line, is that the property
conflict.
line, that road?
Well, yeah.
The middle of the road.
Middle of it.
Okay. Because then, yes, it could be a shared cost between the new owner of the first block and what they choose to do. So I would suggest that that conversation just needs to take place with council if they approve it on what that trigger point will be.
And if it's not gonna
The
be,
access from that side.
yeah, if it's gonna be
Because
an access
They
They
point.
can
access-
actually access from the
Yeah.
county
County
road.
road.
It could just be an alley for something rather.
And it could be, based on the language that the lawyer provided to us, it could be that we never have a need to even ask for the right-of-way, but this gives us the ability to maintain our interest in the property on the right-of-way without affecting your pocketbook.
I mean, you could make the trigger point simply just that if the future property owner of block 1 chooses to make their access right on that right of way, that they're responsible for the,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, because like I said, they don't have to even access it right there. And the Danielsons don't have to access it right there. They can access right in the middle of block 2 up to you if they
But
want.
it could still be an alleyway if needed. I mean,
Yeah.
so you're still gonna put the.
Just an easement.
Yeah, it's just an easement.
Utility
through there.
easement.
And there will be room for emergency vehicles to get in and out of the RV park especially.
Oh, yeah,
There's fire hydrants.
I submitted that
Yeah.
to the city,
Yeah.
what should be done correctly throughout the RV park, or the standards of the industry.
I think we've seen that already.
So my motion did include a recommendation to council to read the letter that was addressed to them by the city attorney in regard to how to move forward with not developing the row at this time. So I think that that's the best way to keep all parties involved happy.
Should we put a sunset limit or a,
I think the council has to do that, don't they?
I mean, you guys
I
can
mean,
do whatever you want.
would say that, at least for a minimum of so many years or
Yeah, if it's
something.
not done within 5 years, then
I mean, it's,
something, yeah.
Who sunset?
it would not have to be done within the next 5 years.
Yeah, because if you guys don't do anything with the property, something happens, then all this could just go away. And
Or something happens tomorrow and they say, oh yeah, we're gonna, we wanted, somebody comes in and buys your lot over there and they want to put that road improvement in, but,
Offer we can't refuse,
yeah. But, I don't know, I don't want to muddy the waters with that.
I still think council can probably address that portion of it. So.
I mean, if you want to, we can make a new motion and start over.
I don't think it's,
I don't think we need-
It's out there right now.
oh.
Oh.
Yeah, we still need to vote on the motion that's out
Yes,
there.
yes.
Which has been seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and
Do you
seconded.
need me to rephrase it, or to re-repeat it, or again,
Amend it?
amend it?
I just say that because I
Miranda's over
understand
there
what the
going,
motion is.
"What?"
The motion that I put onto the floor was that we approve the vacation of Cameron Street. We do not approve the vacation for the row of Custer Street, and that we recommend to council that they refer to the letter from the city attorney, which was addressed to them and the Planning and Zoning Commission, in regards to how to move forward without the developer having to develop that road at this time. That was the motion.
With the amendment of removing the language on the.
Yes, with the
Okay.
amendment
Yes.
of removing the language.
Is that good for everyone?
Mhm.
It was seconded by Justin.
in the
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I should have brought cookies.
Right?
That might-
Don't bring him yet.
That would be bribery, and then we'll all be in trouble.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you
Uh,
for coming.
Oh, we still have fences.
That was a lot of
Yes, yeah, we'll
words.
move on to item C on our agenda tonight, design standards for fences.
Okay, So this one won't take very long in case you're concerned.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so fence standards, this is tied, let me get to my notes, sorry, I should have
Oh,
gotten
that's a
them all
good
those written.
example.
So fencing permits, we get a lot of those. As a reference, I put it in the report, but from January of last year up until May 12th, we've had 73 fence permits that come in. This time of year especially, we have a lot that do come in. Due to the nature of fencing types, brush, we're all over the place when it comes to fences. There have been a lot of instances where a lot of discretionary calls have been made by myself and all the predecessors before because there's a lack of clarity on certain aspects of the code when it comes to fences. So just bringing this discussion to the Planning Commission to find out if you think it's a good idea for us to revise standards within the city of Brush. This is what our code currently has about fencing and screening. Depends on who you're talking to, it may seem like a lot, it may not. But technically fencing, when it comes to residential, if you drew a line here, that's what we have for standards for fencing in residential areas, and that's mainly what I'm talking about here overall. So one of the issues that has come up with is with corner lots, and so this picture is from our land use code, maybe you've seen it before. So it pertains to the clearance area on a corner, so 30 feet back in either direction. Trees got to grow tall, fences got to be lower than 42, and shrubs got to be lower than 36 inches. So as you're approaching an intersection, you can see if someone's coming, of course. It's a safety aspect. Is this consistent around town? Absolutely not, but just this is what it's supposed to be like. So where we're having some concerns and issues, I'm going to just go through a bunch of pictures. I'll use this one back here as an example, so you guys, I'll just use this. So my voice is still projecting toward this in case it needs to get recorded. All right, so alleyway here. So actually, as a disclaimer, I reached out to Brandon Flecksteiner and I asked him, has there ever been any accidents where basically has this been a problem? He said no, in the sense of it being a safety problem. Could it be? Yes. I'm not trying to make something out of nothing. This is more driven for the fact for us to try to be consistent in what we tell people when they want to do fencing. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
So we could say keep doing discretionary calls, or yeah, go ahead and make some tweaks and adjustments.
I think that the on and off ramp at 76 and Colorado Boulevard is a bigger danger than
Yeah.
I agree. I can't see.
Yeah, I can't even.
Until you're in the middle of the intersection.
Pretty much.
I get it. Every week on the way to church, I gotta I understand. So coming up here this way, so if you're looking left, you have clearance here because they got the shorter fence. This way, not so much. Here you come out, you can't see either direction. This is unique because this is technically kind of, it's weird, but this is kind of technically what it's supposed to be like. Not just for the alley, but for corner lots. They got these garages around town. So it's kind of weird because their front yard is probably over here on this street, and so this is technically their backyard. And with a backyard, if you want a privacy fence, you usually want a privacy fence. But this one is stepped down over time, so that way they have proper visibility as they're backing up, so they can see what cars are coming this way. This instance here, someone coming, they don't have that option. There's no garage there, but just as a comparable. But that's kind of weird at the same time. So like here, I don't want people to see me hanging out in my backyard, but I live on this lot, so they can see me hanging out in my backyard.
So I feel like this code was meant more for street intersections. This would be absolutely impossible to implement in Brush on alleyways because every single alley in town has a fence right to the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. In my case, my garage is right at the sidewalk. So I guess I just don't see this as being I feel like the code was more designed to like a four-corner intersection that, you know, might be a through street. Because people really shouldn't just be doing 30 miles an hour through alleys, from alley to alley to alley. So, I don't know, just especially in my ward, I don't even know how you would do this. This would be so hard to implement.
I agree, it would be, but again, we're seeing different stuff around town that people have been saying over time, in my position on what is and is not required. It may not be a big deal But we're always like, what do we tell them? Like, I don't know, what's been done? We're like, well, all kinds of stuff has been done around town, so there's no standard. And there could also be a distinction between alleyway and when you have a garage itself too.
I think
If you wanted to.
another thing that really needs to be considered here, and something that we saw in 2018 when so many fences went down because of the tornadoes that came through, was that people had to get permits and could not restructure their fences the way that they were. And so, I mean, how do you deal with that issue then when you have people who just want to put the fence back the way it was, but now because of new permits and new codes, they're not allowed to, but it's been fine for the last 30 years. So I think you kind of run, it's a rough road.
It is. There's building code side, there's things that address that. Fence permits, go to a big city, they don't require fence permits. Usually only smaller communities do. Probably just a revenue stream, I would guess.
We shouldn't require, in my opinion.
Definitely not after a tornado, that's just kind of mean.
And so a couple more examples of different things. So these guys backing out here, there's my car. Again, has there been accidents? No, but is there consistency? No. This one, they had to drop it down. Whoever made them do it at what point, drop it down lower right there in that last point so they could see cars. Here, they're coming out, they
Oh,
can't
hey,
see
that's my
anything.
neighbor.
And that's another thing, so like, so that 30 feet, does that take into consideration the parts of town that have a boulevard that go?
No, it's just across the board.
I guess I'm just trying to see how this
Yeah,
not
so
just be a giant pain in the ass for everybody that ever wanted to build a fence.
well, it's a pain for us too
My
because
word.
we're supposed to do what the code says and we're like, well, what does it really say?
But
So this is-
does the code standardize between streets and alleyways, or just anything that could be considered a roadway?
It does not make that distinction.
Well,
I would
maybe
probably agree with your overall aspect of it being on corner lots, on the main roads, probably not the alleyways themselves. But again, I'm speaking to the inconsistency that's been required of people over time and how they interpret the code.
So
So
maybe it'd be
for
just
clarity.
easier to clarify the code in the situation of it being an actual street and an alleyway.
That, and I think also where there's garage access on the side. So this is a funny example. So here's two houses, this is Circle Drive. So here's their garage. It's blocked 6 feet all the way up to the sidewalk. This fence just went in, and this is kind of what spurred this for the straw that broke the camel's back as far as, all right, let's take this to planning commission. Is that for these guys coming out, this is their backyard. And so according to how we read it and so forth, there should be some aspect of clearance as they come out, because there's a corner right here, and so the 30 feet coming across, et cetera. And so we said, well, you could either just come across at an angle and then go back up, or kind of cut in. And so this is what they ended up doing, is going in. Whereas most properties around town, it comes all the way up here and then goes all the way up there.
And so they're wondering why their neighbors don't have to do the same.
We're wondering why their neighbors
No.
were able to do that, but again, how the code was read. So from our standpoint, all the time we get from people, hey, you need to do this, and they look across the street and say, well, how come they didn't have to do that? And so our standard answer is, well, that was, we just generalized it, probably before our new land use code was adopted. These are the new standards that we got to implement now. So we're trying to find areas that are not consistent in how they're written or lack clarity so that we can provide consistency. That way we don't feel dumb all the time when we're like,
I will tell you this, and maybe this doesn't put any bearing into this conversation, but in every attempt I've made to do something in my yard, the ordinances have made it a pain in the ass to just get simple things done, like put up a garage. So I don't want something like this. And maybe I'm just biased because my property is situated almost identical to that, except for the fact that I have a boulevard. So like, I'm not right on the street. I've got 8 feet of grass between my sidewalk and my street. But I don't see this being a huge safety concern. Now, I guess I'm a little confused here. Do the people that own the garage also own the new fence?
here?
Yes. Or did their neighbor just make the fence jut out where they can't see?
No, this is their yard.
Okay.
All the way down to the end
All
of
the way
that
to the
pole
Correct.
there.
And again, it's not,
So they were able
safety's
to-
implied with it overall is the reason why that whole thing is in place. But again, our request is more for consistency.
I would agree to the consistency on four-way corners of the 30 feet of clearance. I would agree that that should be a standard, just so that we can see. I do like the tapered fence at the alleyway, but like, let's assume for this picture as an example, where that telephone pole is, where their garage is, that's an alleyway. So now what is this person supposed to do? Are they supposed to go down 3 feet and hey, look, it's a window into my backyard?
Exactly, yeah, that's what's weird about it.
So like, what do you propose?
So this is where
I don't know. It's weird, because if you read it the way it's kind of intended, it makes for weird situations, like that on the right, where you gotta take out an aspect of your backyard, just to accommodate some vision clearance.
And that's no safer than if they just backed out. Like, they still can't see.
But now they got a nice place for their
If
truck.
they're pulling out forward, they can see,
Easy for
but
Frank
that
to pick
doesn't
up.
make any more
Everybody
sense.
wonders why I back
Trails
into
are
my
pretty handy.
driveway.
Tucked right there.
I don't think we have a good answer for you, Tyler.
Really?
So if you would have,
Maybe we should do away
been
with
able
the code.
to do your own discretion without having a code, what would you have recommended they do right there?
Isn't that what isn't that what the city recommended?
Without a code, she's saying, if you didn't have a code that you were trying to follow, what would you have
I
recommended?
mean, common sense, this is your backyard, and so, again, we're kind of bound based on how we think on what we see, because in theory, you can come up with all kinds of stuff if you, didn't exist before. You're like, what do you think about the situation?
Mhm.
But, I mean, to be consistent with what usually is done, it would be, okay, yeah, no, don't worry about it.
Is
6
he,
feet there.
is he set back far enough off of and 18 inches off of the sidewalk?
It's 18 inches, it's just.
Is
an
it-
angle
So
that's
if there's another driveway down at the other end of that fence, why
Right.
didn't he have
Over.
to
Taper it down?
taper it down for that driveway?
I have no idea, it's an old fence, it's been there a long time.
Oh, okay, I thought you said he had to, that
That's
was
what
on
she's
there.
asking about, the new wood
new
fence.
Oh, here, there's no driveway there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the pole, there's actually an easement which goes through
So
there.
just the
the
alleyway
utility
or
easement, and they didn't want to actually build into the easement. Because we tell people with fences, you can put up a fence in the easement, but if they ever gotta get access to their stuff, your fence is coming down.
Okay.
And so that's your call or not, so they didn't want to do that.
That reminds me of a question I need to ask you later.
I don't know what to tell you here.
Yeah, so this is, just different examples again, lower one there. These corner ones are weird, so as long as you have the 30 feet here of clearance, your fence can come up no further than the front of your
Structure.
primary structure. At that point, if you go any further, it's gotta be 4 feet. It's supposed to be over.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yep.
Yeah, that makes
Definitely.
complete sense to me in the safety
Yeah.
aspect there, but
Or you just say, no fences on corner lots.
And some of them are like that, but yeah, it's not ideal.
3 of us have corner lots, so I disagree.
So Juan had found this, I'm not sure which community it's from, but this is within their guidelines of fencing for corner lots and how they do clearance and X, Y, and Z and different things.
I did look at these and I kind of reviewed them, but oh man, do I not agree with it based on the way my house is laid out on my property. Like it really would be so detrimental. I'd lose 6 feet all the way down from the front all the way to the back of my property. Like that would be huge. So I just feel like too, because maybe there was a lack of consistency when structures were built, when homes were built. So you can't, one blanket statement doesn't fit everything because they're all different the way that they were put on the property.
Maybe there's an easy way to do it, Tyler, because no one really has a problem with that on the main street, looking across that 30 feet. If it's a main street, that's really not
There's
much of
probably
an
a few
issue,
out there,
right?
but.
Yeah, so that one seems to make sense for safety, people are driving faster. That's where the sidewalks are at, intersecting. So it seems like that's probably not too much of a challenge. It seems like it's more the 18 inches off the sidewalk's not that big of a deal, right?
Right.
I don't think anyone has problems with saying no barbed wire fences and things like that. The alleyway is where it seems to be more of the issue, the height and the turn radius going into the alleyway.
Alley, and then there's not a lot of these, but where the side garage is at.
Yeah, so maybe we could do something, Tyler, where we can put in some language and talk to Dan Krob that, here are the standards. However, unless the director of the community development department determines that there's not a safety issue or something like that, or there's a reasonable amount of line of sight, you know, some other language that you are able to, or Juan's able to say,
Use your
we
discretion.
can still do this, we're gonna give you a pass on that one.
This picture is a great example. So that blue house is Glacier. I know exactly where we're looking at right here. And so that blue house is Glacier. It's been there for a long time. Most of the houses on Glacier have been. That white house is brand new. It hasn't been there but a couple years. And so they chose to put the garage there because it's part of a newer development. It's not the same development that the blue house on Glacier is. So this right here, it looks like they created their own problem as far as coming out of their driveway and their
But they
garage.
made it-
And their
it's
problem, the line
short.
of sight is what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So
they-
line of
this is unique,
sight.
because this is a 6 foot and this is a 4 foot. And this is technically could be a 6 foot all the way up until here, but they chose probably to be consistent around the front.
And then they chose to do 6 foot on the other side of it to go up against the blue house's fence.
Yeah, so this is their backyard, basically.
The blue house backyard.
No, this is their backyard. is right
Oh,
there.
okay.
And their backyard butts up against it, the blue house.
So I mean, this one seems okay if that's 4 feet. I can't see that from here, to be honest.
Sure.
I'm so sorry. I do not have my glasses. But that seems like an okay thing because that's their front yard, right?
Correct.
But not all of them are laid out that way, are they? That's the trouble. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, there's gotta be some wiggle room in there somewhere.
Yeah, you gotta be able to use your discretion.
And the other thing, Tyler, and I think you're here when we had these discussions when people wanted to go up to that 18 inches off the sidewalk. However, the city had a right-of-way that was wider, so they had to stay more than 18 inches to keep within, or out of the city's right-of-way. And then we said we would allow it with a special permit. However, you would have to get on your homeowner's insurance, if you're going to do that, if there's an accident or something else, you have to have the city listed as additionally insured.
So I talked with Dan Kropp about that last year because the situation came up and Dan agreed with that. He said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And
That
you
shape is
put that
the best
obligation.
best thing ever.
So, yeah, because there was a situation that came up where it was this old part of town where the right-of-way was, but no sidewalk was ever actually constructed, so he assumed that he could build his fence way up here. Or actually, no, technically, it's supposed to be way back there, but there was trees in the way,
Mhm.
and so he had to build it in between the trees and stuff like that, and so
So what, in the city's right away?
he ended up pulling back, because he went forward, he didn't want to wait around, but yeah, I talked with Dan about that overall.
When did the 18 inches thing come around?
The 18 inches, that's been quite a while.
Yeah, that's in city code for 2008.
Mine's like right on the sidewalk.
Yeah, there's some that are.
If I tear that down, do I gotta move it 18 inches? I'm sorry, the fence is just getting taller.
The other one, Tyler, that in the past we used to hear was, before we get a fence permit, do we have to do a property pin, locate property lines to verify it's gonna be on your property? And we used to have a document that said, we highly encourage you to,
That's basically what we do.
that's still the same?
Yeah.
Well,
so-
those aren't always right. If I would have
Correct.
followed that on my Applewood Street house, because Karen, she kept telling me and if that was the case, my fence would have been 6
Well, I
feet
remember
into
that.
my neighbor's garage. I mean, yeah, it was way off. They kept telling me I only had this much room over here when really I had this much room over here because the rest of it was on my neighbor's property. So I think that's, I mean, you can visually look at it and if it got built wrong, but I got that corrected when I sold the house, but still, or when I refinanced.
I remember that. That was
Yeah.
a
Did they move
nightmare.
the
It
pins?
was, no, they just did the survey correctly. It was just plotted wrong.
Well, then they had to relocate pins. now, didn't
You
they?
can't find the pins. I
Well,
don't know if,
put
I
the
think they
new-
found one pin.
That's all they need.
And it was on the corner, so. So, yeah, I don't know how it got so messed up, but
Huh.
I don't know what to tell you. I think we just might have did even worse. Yeah, we don't need barbed wire fences and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that was in there,
have
so-
the shorter fences around the front and
So
on
it
the
sounds like
corner lots.
you guys still want us to just make
and-
discretionary calls.
Yeah.
And if
Throwing
we
you
need
on
to
the
put
bus.
that
Or
as-
if you want, you and Juan research more and see if there's something different out there that you guys would like to follow versus what we have.
Okay.
you know,
But it's hard when every situation is different. I mean, it's not like we're in a new community where
Could that,
everything is cookie
Maybe just
cutter.
implement it on, like, if you wanna do something like that, implement it on newer properties. Like, if it's a newer house, this is the fence standard. If it's an older house, it can be put back where it was at, how it was, height-wise and everything else.
Grandfather.
His grandfather, I mean, because
Yeah, most of them are, I mean, because like if we implemented standards, we wouldn't make everybody go conform to the standards. It's
yeah,
what it is.
but like if you tear, like, I'll use myself as an example. If I tear my 4-foot chain link fence down and I want to put up a 6-foot privacy fence, I shouldn't have to move it 15 feet off the sidewalk so that people can see down it. You see what I'm saying? Like, it just doesn't make sense. There's always been a fence
Well,
there,
the
that's the
front-
boundary.
But it's also only 4 foot tall.
Yeah, in the front, it would maintain the chain link, but like to fence off my backyard.
Oh, yeah.
Per se.
Mhm.
You know, like it is.
We lose 18 inches.
the other thing you have to do
I like that. I already
is,
have cemented in the ground.
now that
And a
they're
welder.
putting all of the utility boxes and pedestals right in the front yard.
Sure.
That's terrible.
Okay, that was what question I was gonna ask you about those, because I have a utility box in my backyard. I didn't put it there.
Right.
Like, how is that?
There's an easement there.
easement in the back.
Yeah,
utility
it's
easement.
fully fenced in.
Doesn't, well,
Yeah.
So when they put that, they.
when they gotta go repair it and service it, down comes the fence.
It's like all the way in, like between, it sits between the four of us where our properties come
Yeah,
together.
that's
Yeah,
not uncommon.
That's
Yeah.
where our house
I've got-
is. Got the-
I got a
Like-
transformer and 3 communication pedestals.
Yeah, it's very rare for someone to get in there and have to actually dig all that up. It happens, but most people's faces are, fences are pretty safe. All right, I'll move on to the second one here. Materials.
We thought you were
If they
done.
all done. So, just asking, so these are pictures around town of the different type of fencing material. Some of these are hard to see. Hodgepodge-ish kind of fencing that people have around town. Not aesthetically the most appealing overall.
Looks better than pallets.
I would say that sometimes. I would say sometimes people do that because like they move into a house, they don't have a fence, but they have a dog, and so they have like, they're,
Exactly for one of those. yeah.
they're trying to do something temporary, but I think if there does need to be some kind of standard there saying, yes, you can have this temporary fence, which is clearly rebar and, what is it? Chicken wire. Like, you can have this temporary fence, but you have X amount of time to.
So that's my question here, is because we don't have any approved, aside from barbed wire, no approved. People could put in whatever they wanted around town for a fence. I mean, you could-
Yeah.
I feel like that should be
Wait till you get chicken coop.
standard fencing
We don't
material.
want chicken wire.
So the question is though, and the challenge is that what do you say and do? Because, one, here's some creative ones
That
around town.
looks
So you got-
better than
You got
some of the other
wheels,
ones.
you got whatever those are.
That is
out
actually
looking
all
things.
2x4s
Yeah, I mean,
screwed
it looks
together.
unique,
I was gonna say that actually
I'm
looks
telling
kind
you,
of
that is
cool.
a beefy
can't see it.
fence.
but then you also have, these are not in town, but you got people doing creative
Oh my
things with
gosh,
fencing.
the
It looks like a
crayons
piano,
one.
skis, looks like giant pencils, cards, mirrors of some sort.
Is
Looks
that
like a
here
giant
in town?
basket.
No.
No, that's, I don't know where these are.
Oh,
These
okay.
are elsewhere.
I was like,
And
that
so you want to
would be
give,
cool.
I mean, some of them are kind of cool, like this is kind of cool.
Mhm.
They always look cool when they're brand new, then give it 10 years.
You
and
know, you
not
gotta
maintain
repaint all those
Those
pencils.
skis look pretty rough there. But I guess
Yeah.
giving room for people to do something unique as well, because we're not in Aspen, Colorado, where like everything needs to look, because people can't afford to do that. And some of
Yeah.
those other fences are there for that reason, because they can't afford a nice fence, so they just put up what they can to keep their dog in or keep people from not seeing them because they want their privacy. And so finding that balance of materials that you can use.
What's your recommendation?
Oh, that's hard.
Well, if I'm asking actually, if you want us to try to develop some standards and then ultimately bring those back in a couple months and get your thoughts on that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, there should be some standardization for that.
Okay, that's all I got. Questions?
I'm okay with the creative stuff though.
If it's not in Good Housekeeping magazine.
We're not
They didn't
having
find
it.
it on Pinterest. We didn't do.
All right,
Okay.
I'm done.
All right, thanks, Tyler. Anything else for the good of the commission? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Moving and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thanks for your time.